Good day, everyone, and welcome to Osteopathy with Heart. Cardiopulmonary considerations in osteopathy where modern science meets traditional osteopathic ideals. I'm Ryan Christensen, here with Mary Goldman, and we'd like to present this new, beautiful, hands-on appreciation for osteopathic, manipulative medicine, giving new insights into some physiology that is really exciting in this 2024 landscape. Let's dig right in. Dr. Still's view of the heart is as a central organ of life, regulating nerves, circulation, and vitality. And modern scientific discoveries are validating Dr. Still's ideas. And we're going to dig into this integration of knowledge into your clinical practice today. So let's start with a brief video.
I'm not a romantic.
I should hope not.
But even I will concede that the heart does not exist solely for the purpose of pumping blood.
That is charming, especially from you.
2023 forward data regard a new understanding of an open circulatory system, vortex arterial flow, and cardiac output driven by tissue metabolic demands. Did you know that there's a newly founded structural lymph drainage channels called the canalicular system and a new fourth meningeal membrane? This is amazing science and a time where immunofluorescence and advancements in imaging, as well as fresh cadaver research, have demonstrated many new old ideas that we as DOs know to be true. It demonstrates unequivocally the wisdom of nature, of Dr. Still, Sutherland, and the great osteopathic researchers. And let's see more about what this means. So Dr. Still, in 1899, published his philosophy of osteopathy. Apparently, he was goaded into writing a book, is what he says, and it was published and it actually lithographed in Ann Arbor. Let's hear what Dr. Still had to say from page 98 of his philosophy. With the knife of reason in hand and the microscope of mind in the greatest known power properly adjusted, we cut and lay open the breast of man. Here we dwell indefinitely. This is the engine of life, the self-propelling machine which has constructed all that is necessary to its own convenience and comfort. It has brought and deposited its own nourishment in the coronary arteries, whose duty is to construct and enlarge the heart as its demands increase. We see the main trunk of supply placed lengthwise with the spinal column for the purpose of constructing a manufactory of nutriment. We pass from the heart upward about a foot. Here we find it has constructed a battery of force and sensation and contains all power necessary to carry on construction to the completed man. In that brain or battery is found all the motor and sensory elements of life, with nerves to transmit all nerve powers and principles found in the human body. There is not a known atom in the whole human makeup that has not been propelled through the heart, through the channels which is provided for such purpose. Every muscle, bone, hair, and all other parts without an exception have traveled through this system of arteries to their separate destinations. All are indebted to the heart for their material size and all qualities of motion and life-sustaining principles of the human body. Wow, Dr. Still. The parts and principles of the human body, depending upon the heart, are numerous beyond supply. Should the descending aorta come to a halt, all parts of the body would suffer a total loss of blood supply. He goes on, every expulsive stroke of the heart throws into line, armed and equipped for duty, thousands and millions of operators, the blood, whose duties are to respect, repair injuries, and construct anew, if need be, from the crown of the head to the sole of the foot. With the best eye of reason, we can see but dimly into the breast of man, which contains the heart, the wonder of man, and the secret of life. I've given these bulky descriptions of the forest and ocean to prepare the mind of man to begin the inspection of the machinery that has constructed the body of which he is the indweller. If we cannot swallow all, we can taste. Now let's start with a practical, getting into the heart and self-treatment and grounding.
Hello, I'm Mary Goldman, and this is Ryan Christensen, and we have been enjoying our careers in osteopathy, particularly the portion in which we do osteopathic manipulative treatment for many years now, and would like to share some of the new information in the field of osteopathy with you. One of the things we have to do when we're going to deal with the newer ideas in osteopathy is open our minds to things that work. Even though we may not have very statistical research, it's coming. There are ways to get it, but it's a very slow process. As you will notice later as we discuss some of the information from 1905, when Dr. Guyton was lamenting the fact that he couldn't get enough research to establish what he was doing, but it didn't stop him from helping people because he knew what he was doing was helping people. Now, when you're going to help people, you really have to stop and think about preparing yourself. You don't just walk in and turn on the tell me what's wrong and just become cold and sit and think about all of the things that you've been taught to go through as far as lists of things that this could fit into. So what you're going to do, first of all, is you're going to relax your body. And you're going to start by allowing your body to sit tall, take easy breaths and let go. And then you're going to turn your mind into listening first and intaking what the patient needs you to hear. Because not only will it affect the way that you treat them, it will also affect the information coming into you in a very major way. So as you sit and relax your whole body and your feet feel very heavy on the ground, and that sensation of the body just being all moving and together, it doesn't take long to do that. You'll feel the heaviness of your feet moving up into your body. You may also start to feel some internal sensations such as feeling sad or grieved, or maybe even you're just way too pressured from having way too many things to do. What doctors would have that sensation? So you've got a stack of charts on your desk to do, and you can't quite get to all of them, and it puts a lot of distraction into your mind. You're not able to sense and bring in the feelings that you need of the patient, because you can read a patient in many more ways than by what they're saying. You can look at their emotional state, you can look at their energy state, you can look at their breathing, you can look at their electrical energy, electromagnetic fields. You can actually sense that. You can tell somebody that's low energy when they're packed and compressed in. You feel it yourself in yourself. And you can tell when they're opening wide open too. And you can tell when you've gotten to a point where the patient feels that they're connecting with you instead of simply being in a room doing what they have to do in order to get healthy again. And this is how we help patients not only respond to the treatments that we give them, but be able to treat themselves. Because as we know as osteopaths, we are whole entities. And it's very important that we remember that the body heals itself. It's not the medication you give it. It's not the surgery you do. It's the body that heals itself. Yes, those medications and surgeries might help, and some OMT might be very helpful too, particularly cleaning the lymphatics out, but it's the whole body. And that's why when we're injured in a chronic state, what happens is that, say, gravity starts to weigh you down, and you start to carry areas where you've been injured, you have the frequency of injury in you. It can cause accommodation across the body. And until you figure out where the body is the most hit, whether it's painful or not, you're going to see that same patient a lot of times over and over again. When you are able to get to the point where they can re-energize and form motion, springing motion in their diaphragms again, because those are all connected too in the body, they'll have more energy, and they'll have more energy to heal.
So taking this new information for our initial practical, let's take a moment with our seeing, thinking, feeling, and knowing fingers to make ourselves our first patient. I don't know about you, but it's been a busy week. And as Dr. Goldman just so beautifully opened us into, if we can be grounded, rooted deeply like the trees, connected body, mind, and spirit, also maybe soul level, and connect to something that brings you joy. There you go. Breathe that right now through your heart center and just feel how good that feels. Maybe it's a person, a being, an animal, a plant, a place, maybe something else you love. And let's just hold that for a moment and feel what that energy feels like. As Dr. Still said, the heart is the mother of all of the nerves. And we'd like to take this palpatory moment for you to be the heart and your own mother for a moment. And notice what that feels like. Allow that stillness to come in. And it's from there that we can begin to meet our patient as ourselves. One of my favorite teachers likes to talk about being a guest in the home. And every time that we want to invite palpation, it's really important for us to check our own pulse. And if you haven't done that in a while, do that now and feel the miracle of this flow. The smooth, spectacular pulsing of our arterial flow, the river of life through our blood. And hopefully by the end of this experience, you'll understand that we think osteopathy is in the blood. Take a big deep breath in and out. Good. And notice that variation. That's a sign of a healthy heart, beat to beat variability. And you'll see some more studies with OMT using that heart rate variability. So one of those pieces we check in with. Let your hands rest back on your lap. Roll your shoulders forward and back. Take a nice breath in through your nose, tongue on the roof of your mouth. Move the tongue to the floor of your mouth as you breathe out. And go ahead and check back in with your heart for a second. Thanking yourself for taking a moment to make you your first patient. And that's where we'll begin.
When the student, in taking up the study of osteopathy, is told that the osteopath is successful by virtue of his complete knowledge of anatomy and physiology, he glories in the assertion. But when he learns, as he certainly will, that the most expert is equipped with only a meager supply, he is likely to be disappointed. It is a perennially recurring surprise to the students of biological sciences to learn that in comparison with what is yet to be determined, the total bulk of demonstrable fact relating to these sciences is infinitesimal. True, in anatomy, we are comparatively well grounded, but our knowledge of physiology and its related sciences is extremely unsatisfactory and must remain so for a long. Why need we then apologize for an incomplete statement of the principles of osteopathy? These words were written in 1904 and still apply. So dig on, DOs.
Thank you, Dr. Goldman. From Dr. Hewlett in 1905, 1904, the textbook of the principles of osteopathy. Wow, as timely then as it is today. And let's remember that Dr. Still was born August 6, 1828, near Jonesville, Virginia, and died in 1917. So it's a really modern and a long time ago. But there's really a lot more to cover. So let's dig right in. Here's the meat of this prop talk today. Let's go beyond the pump. So we're going to challenge the traditional view that the heart has been regarded primarily as a mechanical pump driving blood circulation. Some people say that the heart would have to be the size of me to be able to pump the blood around because of the capillary beds. And emerging research is now showing with studies that the heart plays several other roles, including thought formation and bioenergetics. And we're going to explore 5 key studies that collectively argue that the heart's role is much more than pumping blood. First, we want to talk about the 4th phase of water. This is really cool, and research from Gerald Pollack at the University of Washington. That notice here, along the basement membrane, there's a line of negative charges dispersing themselves and then positive charges. And the water organizes itself, and this forms next to hydrophilic surfaces. How does this work? It actually excludes the solutes and is structured differently than regular water, And it forms naturally in our biological systems, along with blood vessel walls, which can support fluid motion, and it's not relying on heart-generated pressure. And I have all these PDFs that I'll provide for you, so don't worry, you'll get a chance to read all of this data yourself. Notice this picture down here. When they took a biological hydrophilic tube and immersed it in water, they noticed a flow happened without any intervention. And this started Dr. Pollack's question that looked into the polarity of water and the crystalline nature of the liquid crystal intelligence embedded within the water. He took this even further with one of his research assistants, Dr. Lee, and they saw that infrared energy transforms ordinary water into this easy water, providing a basis for circulation without heart contraction. He then, in 2023, took a chick embryo, demonstrating blood flow. They suspended the heart activity and continued to apply infrared light. And they were surprised when the heart flow ceased to beat, but yet flow happened for 50 minutes after the heart cessation stopped. And we see this in the embryologic activity of the heart at 4 and 5 weeks, how the electrical activity happens. There's always flow being driven. And this flow is based on metabolic demands. So what Pollack said is that capillary tubular structures create a chemical concentration gradient driving the propellation of the blood. And this is like a magnetic bullet train, because if the solutes are in the center and it's a clear way around, that opens us up to generate some different types of flow. The implications are great, and I'm not going to read this all to you, but I want to remind you to get your sunshine, getting outside, being involved in nature. These are things that are timeless and we know deeply heal us. Let's dig next into the idea of the heart as a secondary organ of control. And it's interesting because there's a scientist, Dr. Faust and Dr. Alonso, and they studied the heart, and not necessarily as a mechanical pump, but more of a hydraulic ram with siphon pressure. And if you've ever siphoned gas or gotten a taste of petroleum products, if you're of that generation, you may know about the siphon effect, but how fluid and surface tension draws other fluid in. And this goes back to our friend Guyton of Guyton and Hall's Physiology, that cardiac output is primarily dictated by venous return, preload dependent things, and that the heart's demand for oxygen and nutrients is driving the process. So it's really beautiful to see these openings in our new physiology. And he goes on to compare the lancelet to the fish and the involving of our brains, that the amphibian then has a 3-chambered heart. And when we get to a mammal, bird, and now onto humans, that we notice 4-chambered. This is structured for the extra brain development, and cardiac movement is connected with these metabolic demands, which, as you remember, the brain tends to pull a lot. Here's his abstract to read for you, but I like to just talk about that the blood circulates before the heart has achieved functional integrity. The movement is intricately connected with the metabolic demands of the tissues. Long discovered but yet overlooked, negative interstitial pressure may play a role in assisting return to the heart. And this is a beautiful 18-page article, also will be provided for you. And here's the images on systole and diastole, and notice the columns here. In this model of the hydraulic ram, it reinforces the idea of an open circulatory system. Instead of one coming through, that the lymphatics and the vessels of the venous system, the lower pressures, are able to open and close based on tissue demands. And we know we'd have to have a lot more blood to circulate through our frames if there wasn't a smart, intelligent way of compensating. And we believe this is vagus mediated as well. Take home from this, and this is a lot, function drives form, and the metabolism of the tissues drives our physiology. Whoa. And it's interesting as we get into this a little bit further that you notice the different textures. And it's interesting because the lymphatics will have more of a sucking sensation, the veins will have a trickling, and we can look to nature and flow of water for ideas about this, noting that inherited intelligence. Now, let's take this even deeper. A Russian scientist, Dr. Goncharenko, talked about heart space as the basis of superconsciousness. And here we're going to get a little weird. Dr. Goncharenko, here on the right, describes mini hearts. And this Russian research has been translated to English, so I will also provide this article within the ventricles directing specific portions of blood to individual organs. And this is fascinating. They would have an injury in the carotid or in the radial artery, and they'd notice that certain areas of the ventricle always sent the same clots to different areas. And it was faster than the nervous system could mediate it. And he talked about an inherent consciousness. And if we think of that little battery that we all did in school with the flow and wrapping the copper wire and making the light bulb light, think about heme, iron molecules in the blood, going through this charged tube. And that flow that is, as we know, flow follows function. The aortic root, even the shape of this, is driving vortex flow. And this blows our mind about the heart as a conscious organ processing and distributing blood based on the needs of different tissue areas and parts of the body. This is even more cool how we get into the heart brain. And on this image, you'll notice the yellow is a male heart, and on the pink on here is a female heart. And these are the mapped heart brains. They've used computer modeling to tag all of the ganglia and their long-standing connections. This opens up a lot of new possibilities, and this is from the Jefferson University, The Heart's Little Brain from 2022. Let's take it to the next level. Dr. Dotievich built on Gocharenko's work and a modern view for thought formation, and his research suggests that the heart generates thought at a supramolecular level, particularly in the left ventricle. And there's an interaction between the biosphere and the noosphere. Check out this image. He says there's 12 layers, and that the highest perfected element is layer 12. Above this is the creator of the universe. And look at this, layer 8, the Center for Control and Coordination of Physiologic Systems of the Body. Talking about this heart brain, but maybe those 8 billion red blood cells in our body are pulling information from the environment and coding it and sending it to our tissues so that all of the communication also that goes through acoustic signaling, because every cell in the body has receptors for sound. It may talk that our pulse is more of a drumbeat and more of what drives us into this next chapter. And this is really emerging research, so please don't shoot the messenger. But if you're feeling called to understand how superconsciousness plays a role, this may be the doorway. Vortex flow of the heart is really cool too. And first research also from this article shows that the blood flow vortex patterns align with Still's philosophy of this dynamic force. Again, we want to keep emphasizing that the peripheral demand of the tissues, the heart is being called by the tissues to provide this nourishment. And look at these beautiful flow dynamics. Remember the centripetal force downward and then the centrifugal force outward, or vice versa. And you'll notice in this diagram the intricacy of the swirl and the swirl within the swirl balancing this. Now, knowing what you know about easy water, look at that exclusion zone around the outside. And you're looking into the tube now, but remember feeling your pulse as we look at this next image. This is also from Coates. And this double spiral longitudinal vortex is mind-blowing to me. And this was introduced from Maxwell Fravel's work and the Rule of the Artery folks in Australia. It's a beautiful tie-in to understanding that we're just learning how some of these mechanisms apply in real time. The heart also has an electromagnetic field, and according to Dr. Roland McCready of HeartMath, that it's 5,000 times stronger than the brain's. Its electrical field is 60 times stronger than brain waves, and that's why we measure EKGs so much easier, and it takes a lot more sophisticated technology to measure an EEG. And notice the waves waving on waves. This is some of that heart rate variability that happens with the variation in breath. And notice how that looks like a leaf and a wave. In the conclusion, the heart has a multifaceted role, and it's much more than a pump. Let's do this quick summary, which I found on YouTube, that I think will blow your mind. And after about 55 seconds, I'm not sure where the research is going, and it'll be really interesting to see. Let me see what you think.
Do you know your heart is not actually a pump? The heart is in the shape of a chestahedron, a 7-sided shape where all of the surface areas are the same. When placing a chestahedron in a box, it sits on an angle of 36 degrees off center. This is the same angle which the heart sits in the chest, hence why it's called a chestahedron. Placing a chestahedron in water creates a vortex in the water, and your heart tissues is in a vortex spiral. Your heart is actually one muscle, but wrapped in a spiraling vortex form. form. This is because your heart is a vortex energy generator. Blood enters the heart and creates a vortex spiral inside of the heart. Your heart turns water in the blood into plasma, the fourth state of water, which they'll never tell you about. Plasma makes up approximately 55% of your blood. The earth is electromagnetic. The reason why heart rearranged is earth is because the heart takes the electromagnetic energy of the earth and turns this into plasma in the blood to run the physical body. Your heart is directly connected to the universe, to the electromagnetic energy of the earth. This is why we always see Jesus pointing at his heart. Your heart is inside of the chest. This is where the treasure is, inside of the heart. Your heart contains 40,000 neurons, which is the exact same cells in your brain. The heart is the emotional brain which gives you guidance. It tells you what is right and what is wrong. This is why we say follow your heart. So much.
So, wow.
Do you know your heart?
Now, let's get back into a practical where we're going to practice how we can feel these different textures and notice this type of new flow.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to practical number 2. Today, I'd like to introduce you to our amazing special guest, Regan Swartz. Regan is an aspiring osteopathic physician and an amazing member of our team at Still Waters. So we are glad to have you, Regan. And she is going to be our leg and body model for this next practical. And Regan, if you want to go ahead and get supine on the table in a comfortable position.
Feel free to practice
Is there any
along
leg
with
that
it.
you had an injury on or a pattern left side? Okay. So what we're going to do with this next practical is palpate arterial flow in particular. And one of the things we're talking about with the continuous nature of the cardiovascular system and the cardiopulmonary system is that the vessels themselves have different textures. So I'm going to invite you to find, we're going to use her injured leg today because that's what needs the treatment. And take a scooped hand underneath the popliteal fossa with no force, just letting her leg rest there. And then your other hand, you're going to imagine it like you're putting a top on a Russian nesting doll. And you're going to bring that over and you're going to gently wait while you just let it fall into a comfortable position. A little inferior to the patella, which is right here. There's a line right there. And I'm just going to use my hand to comfortably fold around that. Not putting too much pressure and just noticing, letting it kind of settle in, letting her leg wiggle. That's it. And what I want you to start to feel is a sense of a globe under your hand. You'll feel the texture of the soft tissue. You may feel the texture of the bone. Those are textures we're familiar with. But if we know the arterial flow, and because we know the anatomy as osteopathic physicians, we can notice a sense of flow. And arterial flow feels a certain characteristic. Remember that pulse that you palpated before. You feel the whooshing like you're riding a wave through the surf. And feel if it's quiet or turbulent. And there's a little bit of turbulence in Regan's flow on this side, which would make sense with endothelial damage and some kind of injury. Any tricks, Dr. G, when we're palpating these legs to feel this? There's the fluid sense. It's expanding now.
Relaxing your hand, letting the information come to you.
I have to drop my shoulders too.
And if you take a breath in on your own and just let it come out, it puts you in a parasympathetic, very open feeling state.
And if you don't have someone else to practice on and you're doing this virtually, you can palpate this on your pet or your kiddo. It feels really gentle and nice, and we're just listening with our seeing, thinking, feeling, and knowing fingers. And when you notice a change in the texture, there's actually just a huge shift that happened for Regan. Here it goes. Everything just got really quiet. And you may notice in the periphery her respiratory rate changed a little bit. We watch that just gently with the rise and fall of the chest. It's something that is kind of subtle, but when you start seeing it through a lot of osteopathic treatments, it's a really beautiful sign. There we go. And there was a little twist, and now it's kind of changed texture, and it's sort of pushing me off. I'm going to follow that, and it changed. And it's interesting because one of the privileges I had was to train with Dr. Viola Fryman. And she said, one of the ways we know this is so real is if it wasn't real, it would never change. So allow yourself to be changed and see what happens. Now, part 2, Dr. Goldman's going to demonstrate. At the upper thorax, she's going to have one hand here, but instead of holding the container of this BR tube, we're going to hold the whole thorax. You can go through the lower abdomen and the front of the umbilicus, or you can come up through the shoulder. It feels better on the left side to palpate through the great vessels. So,
May I roll you a little bit to your side, please? I always push the back of my hand against the table so that I'm giving the patient space, and pick up here. Very heavy on my lower hand, and that pressure allows me to have a better cranial sense of what's going on. It's becoming more and more quiet. You can relax that left arm if you'd like to. Beautiful.
Here, let's get there.
Whichever is comfortable.
it's nice sometimes when you get a sense of potency.
Yes, it's picking up energy.
The
You can
inherent
also feel the flow of the great vessels, the
And it's
sense of
starting now.
the arterial flow through the aorta, and a different texture through the veins that you'll start to feel.
And there incoming the veins. Very different texture to it.
Veins feel to me like trickling mountain spring.
Yes.
Is there any, how else would you describe the texture of that? And arterial flow as well.
Arterial flow in this case is picking up a little bit of a gush, and the veins are more unidirectional. And that's probably not the best description of that on the arterial side. But there's more power,
That's it.
potency going through the aorta, and the veins, on the other hand, are kind of more of a downhill type sensation.
The other beautiful thing to remember is that vortex flow that is so present in the artery that builds the pulse pressure. You'll almost feel the turbulence of the vortex, but the real power in that. And most of us have never sat with a pulse long enough, as they do in Ayurveda, the medicine of yoga, or the traditional Chinese medicine, all involve pulse diagnostics. And this is actually how we can use osteopathic techniques to invite some of those same feedback mechanisms.
And the deep breath starts to just relax a lot of this. And the energy is not really decreased, it's just more uniform, consistent in the area. You can still pick up some of the pulsation. It's a little harder to feel the veins because it's almost like they've spread out, like the flow across the rock where it spreads apart.
What a beautiful texture change. And as Dr. Goldman described that, how did it feel for you, Reagan?
She is so gifted. That was awesome. It was very pulsating kind of the whole time, but I did feel it quiet down. And as you described each of the sensation, it kind of like lit up for me, and I became aware as you went through the process. So that was really illuminating for me.
Let's take it one step deeper. Here's our advanced lab. Dr. G, can I have you invite you to check in right along this shoulder here on Regan.
Left shoulder.
On her left shoulder, yeah. And I'm gonna tie it here. And if you're teaching with students or residents and other learners, this is a fun one. So we are gonna ask the heart to show us the call for fluid. Is it getting enough preload so that it can pump? Because we know the metabolism itself in the tissues drives cardiac flow. There we go. And now ask the artery to show itself clearly. I love that. It feels like jet boat. And now we'll ask the veins to show their flow. You don't have to stay too long. There you go. And the veins are much softer, much quieter. And then let's palpate the lymphatics. And the lymphatics have a siphon effect, a sucking, and they're a one-way valve. So I'd like you to feel the kind of sucking, vacuuming sense of the lymphatics. It'll be a completely different texture, and it takes you really far different than the palpatory expanse of the bone. But once you get into the lymphatics, ask it to show you the bone. There. Remember, we are one contiguous fascia. Everybody has their specialized parts, but we're all flowing to the same direction, back to our mother, the heart. When it feels balanced, you can gently disconnect. Check back in with your heart field for a moment. And what did you notice, Dr. G? Dr. G has never done that, by the way, so I kind of dropped this on her in the moment.
This is the first time. This particular shoulder area had a deficiency initially, and it was kind of a disturbing feeling because I felt like I was being sucked into the shoulder. It wasn't the hands being pulled in, it was an energy feel of
Your
something,
attention?
of attention. Yes, that would be the right word. And what happened basically is that it wasn't that her shoulder was shrinking or that she was becoming pulled in, but rather that the fluids in the area were being pulled in along with my attention. And then as we started palpating the lymphatics and things began to balance, the shoulder picked up quite a bit of openness.
The holy trinity of osteopathic flow is arterial, venous, and lymph. Write that one down, and we'll see you for the next practical. Good work.
Well done.
Hello, everyone, and
So now let's shift out of our heart discussion to update on how the cerebral spinal fluid flows, a new description of the glymphatic system, and a new meningeal membrane. The cribriform plate is a source of CSF drainage, and we found in 2023 via immunofluorescent probes by Dr. Spera, initially in mice and now in humans, that the olfactory bulb is continuous with this lymphatic flow through the cribriform plate. And here's the dura mater. Notice this nasal submucosal interstitium, and the implications of vascular disease in our long COVID crisis have kind of shown that this venous return, arterial supply, and CSF are all tied in through peri and paravascular spaces. This is mediated by the cells around the vessels themselves. So you're looking at the lumen here, and this is the pericyte. Here's our endothelial cell in the tight junction. And notice this astrocyte foot process along the basement membrane. Zoom in here. Here's our basement membrane, and this is our blood-brain barrier. Oh, the protection of the blood-brain barrier. Well, our understanding is changing quite rapidly. And here's the nanoprobes. So here's your lumen again, and looking at the blood. Around it in the white is the smooth muscle, and our red is the smooth muscle, and the white is the end foot, endocyte, endothelial foot. And notice this green tracer is the CSF coming around the paravascular spaces. And this is wildly cool, confirming what we've known to be true in osteopathy. Here's another cartoon that shows the structural and functional features from nature in 2015. But notice along this transverse sinus that there's this lymphatic vessel along the dura. And as we zoom into here along the arachnoid and the pia and the brain parenchyma, that we see these one-way lymphatic vessels. And this is newly discovered research. Let's talk about this slim. Again, looking at this cross-sectional, this is a new fourth subarachnoid membrane that has shown up in fresh dissection as well as in these immunofluorescent probes. Let's hear from Dr. Iliff, who discovered this. University of Rochester Medical Center, and this is called the glymphatic system.
The brain's highly metabolically active. The brain cares an awful lot about what its environment is like. If it's off just a little tiny bit, it stops functioning properly. We showed that the CSF goes into the brain just like people thought before, but it actually does so along very specific anatomical structures. There's a specialized anatomy that allows the CSF to move very quickly and very deep into the brain, exchanging with the fluid that's inside the brain and then moving out. So it's a much more efficient system for clearing the fluid and the waste out of the brain. We injected fluorescent tracer into the CSF, or the fluid that surrounds the brain, and watched to see where it went. The fluid, as it moves down the artery, is able to move right into the brain tissue. As it moves into the brain tissue, eventually, if you look long enough, where it collects is at the other end, at veins, which are another part of the circulation. Once it reaches those veins, it's able to drain out of the brain along the outside of the veins. As the fluid sort of courses between those two, in along the arteries, through the tissue, out along the veins, that continuous flow sweeps along particles that are sitting in between the cells. Amyloid beta is a protein that is made and secreted from cells in your brain all the time. In Alzheimer's disease, one of the things that happens is amyloid beta builds up in the brain and clogs up the space in between the cells. And it's thought that that's what kills the neurons and causes the dementia that's the hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. So when we first found this system and found that it was clearing extracellular solutes, we said, well, what solutes might be of interest that might be being cleared by this? And when you think about extracellular solutes that the brain wants to get rid of and needs to get rid of, the first thing that comes to almost everyone's mind is amyloid beta. So that was pretty much the first thing we tried, was to find out whether amyloid beta that's between the cells is cleared along this pathway. One thing that could be happening in Alzheimer's disease is this pathway is failing. So if because you're aging, this pathway stops working properly, or if because you suffer an injury or an infection at some point in your life, maybe this pathway stops working properly, and that ends up causing the deposition and the accumulation of amyloid. For treatment, it suggests that you could slow the process of amyloid deposition, perhaps by speeding the system up and sort of flushing the brain out and getting rid of the amyloid before it accumulates. And if you had, a brain that had a bunch of amyloid that had already accumulated in it, perhaps you might be able to flush that away or wear away those accumulations with, a higher rate of flow. So we may be able to try to modulate or change how this system functions to try to clear it more quickly.
Wow. And I think that is a very potential role for osteopathic manipulative treatment in neurocognitive and neurodegenerative conditions. This slim membrane is an extra layer, and it challenges our 3-layer idea, and it's a host of a large population of inflammatory and immune cells that responds to increase of inflammation and aging. So this is a place for the immune system to also come into the picture. I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit and go into our new studies from gross anatomy. And here's our current understanding of CSF drainage with the arachnoid granulations, as well as this kind of lost area. Look here and follow through with me. This is coming from Dr. Pessa's work, and it's a novel pathway for CSF found on gross dissection, January of 2023. So let's orient. This is the venous sagittal sinus. He's dissected in, and you'll see there's a little tracer here through a little membrane. We're going to zoom in on that, and you'll see here that this is the CSF channels that he was seeing. We dive in deeper now, and here's a superior sagittal vein, and on each side inferiorly are these channels. He described that they don't involve intermediary lymphatics, that they go from the arachnoid meninges to the subclavian, and it's a secondary pathway, a group of channels that are embedded in the surrounding tissue. This is a separate cervical terminal drainage as well for this brain lymph. And he dissected down, this is the carotid and going into the neck dissection. And you can see these channels going in deeper. And here's a better view of the superior sagittal vein with both of these little areas here. They also tag this with probes, and you could dig into the article more. But here's our new understanding with the CSF canalicular system included. And notice here at the back of the head, these lymphatic vessels around inion and down through the deep cervical lymphatics directly into the lymphatic duct of the subclavian vein. And we also know because of the perivascular that this pathway connects here. So there's redundancy in the system, also going down into the vertebrovenous plexus. And this research is game-changing. And this is from gross anatomy from a surgeon. So exciting. Quick reminder that this is all of the places that the vagus nerve goes. That's all vagus map. And let's dig into our next practical, lymphatic drainage of the head.
Welcome to practical number 3. We've just talked about that the lymph drainage and the venous drainage go right into the same spots. Follow Dr. Goldman along for how we treat the nasal root, the back of the skull, and all of these lymph drainage channels. And remember, guest in the home, and everything with lymph, we'd like to start indirect. You can do your HVLA and direct muscle energy for a lot of conditions, but with these lymphatic conditions, it's really important to kind of allow the fluids to guide. So, Dr. G, take us away.
Usually when treating the head, I like to make sure that the body below it is ready for it. So a necklace technique, which most of you have learned in medical school, is a very good way to start. And that release allows the flow forward in the lymphatic system. So,
and a quick reminder of that, we're stacking flexion, rotation, inhalation and exhalation, as well as inferior or superior motion. So take it in all 4 planes of motion and get that moving there and follow that breath and ease. Thanks.
Thank you. And the posterior area of the head is a good one to start with when you're doing lymphatics. So any type of a gentle soft tissue OA release, moving into a release of the nuchal ligament, going right on up into the inion area to the area of the middle nuchal line. This is over the transverse sinuses, so it's very helpful for draining some of the lymphatic fluid into venous area by decreasing the congestion in the area. The next step is to start thinking about the front of the head. And one of the best things that we do for this is we want to get to the cribriform plate. So what we're going to do is open the nasal area, and that can be done a couple different ways, but I like to take the fingers and pick up the area of the frontal bones. So I'm picking the edge of that with pressure upwards gently, and then getting into the nasal bones. Remember, those are in front of the nose, not at the sides, not the lacrimal bones. And we're going after the nasal bones, and we're just spreading that area a little bit. And then pay attention to the energy in that, because that motion that you're improving is huge in getting the drainage through the cribriform plate and down into the area of the olfactory nerves and through to the nasal mucosa. The next step, if that didn't clear, is to go back and perhaps pick up the area right at the nasal bone itself. That's probably done a little bit better from below than it is from above.
That's so brilliant too. You're also getting into the V1 of the trigeminal branch there.
And that's a wonderful feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, that's great.
So from there, what you're getting is drainage that is going to go back down through the cervical nodes. This is all kind of new information. They didn't even believe we had lymphatic brain drainage up until maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So then you can go back down to clearing below.
And can we recheck the cranial mechanism? Will you let us know how your work, recheck and judge your work, Dr. Goldman? Thank you. And Reagan, what did you notice?
Massive energy release right here. It was like, kind of took my breath away. It was great. She's fantastic.
So the area has come quite a bit, and the cranial mechanism is smooth and open. There is some tension on the left side of the head, but that does not appear to be lymphatic.
And it's beautiful to note the change. The most important thing with any cranial treatment is give yourself a gentle change and then allow the patient to reset. I tell my patients the treatment begins when my hands leave you, because now your health knows what to do. So thank you. Great work on practical 3. One more at the end. You're almost there.
Wow.
To practice.
How good does it feel to honor the potency? And lastly, these lymphatics, the brain and the heart, in the perivascular and perivascular system, there's some cool new research too from Bruno Cicli, DOMD, about the premovascular system, which is connected in to the acupressure meridians, and these channels may go all the way down through the entire peripheral vascular system as well. We are so excited to see with functional MRI scanning and other things how this can continue to grow. Wow, wonderful work. Now let's revisit where we began, back with Dr. Still. And he said, what are nerves? This is now from the Philosophy of Mechanical Principles of Osteopathy, the banned book that was only 6 or 8 copies left because it gave away too many of Dr. Still's secrets. So we've rediscovered this, and it's so beautiful to read Still's words. Please receive these and all of the philosophy. Nerves are the children and associates of one mother, the heart. She, the heart, is the wise, form-giving power of life. She's life centralized for the use of each and all animals. All beings are simply constructed through the wisdom and the vital energy contained in this mother's power. She plans and builds according to the forms necessary to execute the orders of her dictators. She is the mother, nerve, and soul of all nerves pertaining to this body. She orders, constructs, and repairs, and continues in constructing her work to absolute completeness. She's a graduate from the School of the Infinite, and her works are expected to show perfection in forethought and are to be inspected, passed upon, received, or rejected by the scrutinizing mind of the Infinite, whose orders are very positive, always holding before her mind the penalty of torture and death for failing to do all her work to the fullest degree of physical perfection. First is formed the material, in which the spiritual establishes an office in which to dwell and oversee and enforce the requirements of specifications for construction. She then goes to the manufactory, and when done, the abdominal workshop for nutriment. In order to not be disturbed, she sends out her foreman with instructions to build a fence around herself and calls that wall the pericardium. Outside of that are other separating walls with attachments. At this important moment, she reads in the specifications that she's expected to run out the necessary tracks for the construction of a storage battery, the brain, with the grand trunk line, the spinal cord, and connect that battery with her office, the grand central, with wires, the nerves. As she advances with the plans and specifications, she makes other connections, constructs lungs, liver, spleen, pancreas, kidneys, bladder, genital organs, limbs of locomotion, the framework and the finished house, the thorax and abdomen. She patiently continues the performance of making all conveniences necessary for the comfort of the indweller, the spiritual being. Thus, we find the heart to be the mother of all the nerves of the human body. Of all its parts and principles known in vital action, from her vital chamber, she delivers vitality to all forms, fibers, and functioning substances of life and motion. All parts of the body are wholly dependent on this vital center, and it can move and act without the assistance of any machine or part of the machine to which she is given form and life. She charges one set of fibers with vitality, and we call them nerves of sensation. She charges another set we call nerves of nutrition, and another set of wires we call nerves of motion. They have no motion, no sensation, no nutriment. They're simply roads for the convenience of executing the orders found in the plans and specifications of life. My object in the foregoing description of the heart is to draw attention to the reader to another thought that I'll present as well as I can. We can all comprehend that the heart is the engine of blood, force, and supply. With this statement, I will ask the question, would the severing of a nerve produce paralysis of a limb or any division of the body? Or would it be tearing up of the road between the limb and the heart? It is true enough that the brachial nerve reaches the brain from the arm. If that nerve has been severed and motion destroyed, has it not separated the limb from the storage battery, the brain, from whence it was supplied? To illustrate this thought more forcibly, I'll compare the heart to a tree whose fruit is good to eat, nice to behold, fine in flavor, and surely a child, the mother tree. The wood, the leaf, and the coloring matter of the leaf, limb, and fruit are simply physical expressions of the power of the mother tree to create variations in the several divisions of the tree. What evidence have we that it's absolute and undebatable the physical forces of the body aren't conceived, developed, and issued from the heart? We speak of sensory nerves, nutrient nerves, motor nerves, voluntary and involuntary nerves, but to some degree, we've described their special locations. By the knife and microscope, we've found that all systems of nerves have one universal connection. We have found nothing that would warrant us in saying that the brain has any power to create nerve fluid or force. We can talk about the brain of the head, the abdominal brain, the brain of the liver, and go on with such speculative divisions and find a new brain in every ganglion of the body. But we've only found storage batteries from the heart that are new to our observation. We find one cluster in the lungs, one in the brain, one in the stomach and bowels, one at the kidneys, uterus, bladder, spine, and limbs. But all sing sweet home to Mother Heart. When peace and harmony prevail, and cry with anguish when she fails to communicate the glad tidings of health, peace, plenty, and harmony. Thus, joy is perpetual when the watchman cries, all is well. Thank you for being a wonderful part of our profession and for digging on. And we hope to show you that traditional osteopathic philosophy is emerging into modern physiology in a beautiful way. We have a quick summary of evidence I'm going to leave for you to review. And lastly, we finish as we began, coming back to our practical. This QR code will take you to some links and some articles in case you're wondering. And we will close with our practical, heart field palpation. Thank you.
Yay! Congratulations! You've done it. You made it to the end of this practical. And we just wanted to say thank you. First, for taking this time today to learn and to treat yourself and to open up to some really cool new phases of the heart that you may not have been appreciative of. The last challenge I have for you is every time you listen to heart or lungs, I'd like you to try to notice the heart field. We know that this heart has a brain, a nervous system that's more than just a ganglia, that there's inherited intelligence and perfection here. So go ahead and take one hand and check in with your heart, one hand on your belly. If it feels comfortable to close your eyes and drop your shoulders, just check in again, similar to how we did at the beginning of this session. And just notice what's different. And maybe you received a treatment, maybe you gave a treatment, and maybe you just were able to listen. But this information, this philosophy of osteopathy changes us. And I know my heart rate normalized, like there's some pain that I was having actually shifted. And I'm feeling a lot clearer and more centered. And I think when we tune into our true physician's heart, the heart of an osteopathic physician, going back to our founder, Dr. Still, over 150 years ago, on June 22nd, 1874, the banner was unfurled. Dr. Still in 1899 and 1904 were talking about these ideas that modern medicine just now has the scanners and the 2T functional MRIs to prove it. It is so exciting to be an osteopathic physician. And as you treat and listen to the heart, be aware of all of these other parts of it and see, and what other things do we want our colleagues to know as they take this out?
I think that for those of us who are aging, that is very helpful to get that lymphatic congestion in your brain gone, because it can help your memory. It can help your whole body function correctly. You sleep better, you feel better. That's true for anybody that's gotten into a disease state.
To find health should be the object of the doctor. Anyone can find disease. Reagan, any insight for someone who's newer to the profession, but still very talented and has a lot of insight?
I'm just so grateful for so much knowledge, just the wealth runneth over. And, you know, trust your judgment, trust your hands, and trust the energy, and the answers are there. You just have to find it.
So get your shovels and dig on, because we're DOs, and that's how we do it. We'll see you next time. Thanks again.